I am taking these shitty leaf springs out of this 79 series Land Cruiser, cutting it apart with an angle grinder and turning it into a 4-linked monster. From the start to the finish, I'll be showing you everything that goes into it and what it can do when I'm finished.
G'day guys, and welcome back to another episode. Beside me here I have got a 2022 79 series Land Cruiser. This is in here for a full Jrace coil conversion. This car behind me is getting the whole works. It's actually going to end up with more suspension stuff going on under it than my ute, so it's going to be pretty cool. Now basically this is a customer's car. You wouldn't read about it, but the bloke's name's Tim. This is a job that I had booked in before I phased into my YouTube career. There is a bit of a lead time on these kits to get them made. I had a bit of a downtime where I shifted into this shed, so we sort of organised it that this would be the first big job that I do in my new shed. So we're here today and yeah, I'm about to start it. So I've already gone and ripped the tray off. Basically I used the hoist to do that, and then I borrowed the neighbour's forklift and moved it out of the road.
So the next job was to remove the fuel tank, and it did have some fuel in it which made it heavy, so I used my Kincrome gearbox jack to get it out safely. I then removed the rear section of exhaust, followed by the wiring loom and brake lines. Then it was time to remove the factory housing and the leaf springs. So now that I've got the car all apart, what I'm going to do is I need to lift this cab up a little bit, which means I've got to go and undo all the mounts. And I need to get this all set up on some jack stands, mask it all up and start prepping, ready to start tacking some plates in. So I've just gone and lifted the cab up, and I've got my extensions of my hoist in there holding it up so I could actually take the hoist out. But pretty much everything through here is free, so I can get to all this chassis to weld and paint and whatever. So now I need to mask up the cab. This is the stuff that I'm going to use to mask the cab. There's different ways you can do this, but this is what I used to use whenever I'd paint a tray or a car or something where I needed to mask. This stuff works really well, so I'll give you a quick look. So the idea is sit it at the front of the car, pull it out, pull it up, all the way over the car, and then it just drapes down over the sides and you can mask it all up. If you are ever going to use this stuff, one important thing to make sure is that you put it the right way. It actually says on here, paint this side, and that's really important because if you put it the right way, what the overspray does is it sticks to the plastic and it stays there and it doesn't fall off. But if you put it the wrong way, it's like slippery on the other side, so it'll flake off and it'll go everywhere. So you might be halfway through painting a car or something, and if you've got it the wrong way, then you might just need to blow something down and you'll blow it with the air and you'll hit it and it'll all just flake off and go everywhere and make a big mess. Really important that you put it the right way. Speaking from experience. So you get the idea, pull it over and then, yeah, just pull it all out and it basically covers the whole car. So I'll get my roller masking tape and I'll go around and I'll tape it down in spots so it can't blow up. Next job was to start cutting off the old bracketry that we no longer require. When it comes to cutting mounts off a chassis, it's very important to only cut the mount and not the rail. The way that I do this is I cut the bulk away, then I pick the small bits off, and what's left I sand that back off with a grinder. It is very hard to not nick the chassis, but if you do get it right, it should look something like this. The front spring hangers are a bit of a pain in the ass to remove, and I do see a lot of coil converted utes with them still there. I'm going to spend a bit of time here. The process to get these off carefully will probably take me over an hour, but the end result is worth it. What I do is I cut these up into sections, and bit by bit I break them off with the pliers until I'm left with just the weld, and then I grind that down. While I've got the grinder out, I strip back all the paint off the chassis, and then I clean up the mess and get ready for the next step.
So I've got the chassis pretty well prepped up now. Pallet's obviously turned up, I've unpacked it, I've got everything laid out, and I'll quickly run you through what I'm putting in this car. basically I've laid everything out on this table so I can work out where it all goes and get the left and right pieces. Because these are all CAD design, there is certain holes which line up with the factory chassis holes on the rails, so I sort of can't get it wrong. That there's for the torsion sway bar, which I'll show you a bit later on. Then under the bench here, nice new painted arms, Merlot red, color coded, and Summit machine flex joints in the end of them. Look at that. That is a Merlot red radius arms. Then I've got like Panhard, got some King parts here from Mike's. So that's steering dampener, billet, drag link. Then what we got here, a lot of this stuff is, well, everything here is required for engineering. So things like upgraded brake booster, because it's going to have bigger tyres than standard. Airbags for in the rear coils, that's for the GVM. Sway bar spacers. ABS relocation, so they don't get all caught up with the big lift. Tail shaft spacer, braided brake lines, flare rubbers. And over there, couple of boxes of King shocks. These are cool. Stainless CNC bent brake lines to replace the ones that are on the chassis, because now we've got coils going in the road. They need to be routed a different way. And got a full set of wheels here because this car needs GVM rated wheels. Most manufacturers only have like, you know, couple of different options in GVM rated wheels that suit these kind of conversions. So he's gone with these. I'll open this one after, but that's the new track corrected rear housing. And this here is extra. He's gone for a sheet front housing. This is going to be really cool. I'm really keen to see this. I am really jealous because I want one of those in my ute. Now, before I can go tacking any of these plates to the chassis, I need to go and prep them. So not only am I going to paint them with weld through primer, I'm just going to give them a quick sand up and clean up, you know, anything that's on them. Same with the chassis rails. So all this area that's bare metal, I'm gonna go wipe all that down, make sure everything's nice and clean, and then I'll hit it with the weld through primer. And once it's dry, then I can start sort of tacking it together. And just before I start sanding, Kincrome have sent me some new 6 amp hour batteries. These are big boys. So pretty much all I'm doing to prep these is just buzzing around the edge with the flapper disc and just giving it a quick rough up. Then all I'll do is I'll just give this a quick spray with some wax and grease, give it a wipe, throw it outside, ready to be painted. If you don't go to the little bit of effort to do this rusty stuff on there, it's like dirt and not really ideal for your paint to stick to. All right, so I've got all these pieces cleaned up. They're down here on a bit of cardboard and they have been weld through primed. Now I'm ready to start priming up these chassis rails, and I just wanted to talk quickly about this weld through primer. This stuff is commonly used around the four-wheel drive scene, especially with a lot of guys at home doing chassis bracing, you know, putting bracing on the outside of the rails, all that kind of stuff. Anything to do with chassis welding, a lot of people are using this stuff, and I think there's a common misconception. A lot of people think that you can just weld through the weld through primer, like the name suggests. Although you can, it is better to weld through than normal paint, but it still affects the weld. Your welder's still gonna spit and carry on and not do the perfect weld because it's got something contaminating the area. So when you're using this stuff, you wanna spray all your pieces that you're welding on, and then you wanna go and spray down your area that you're welding to. Then you go and put all your pieces on, you tack them all in place. You don't worry about it spitting and carrying on when you're tacking. You just got to do that bit. But then you want to go and get yourself some really good wire buffing stuff to remove absolutely as much of this stuff as you can before you start to weld. So the whole idea is you want to get this stuff between your two pieces of steel to prevent it being rusted in there later. Now, all your stuff around there, outside of that, after you've put it together, you're gonna prime and paint that properly later. I see a lot of people online using it like it's primer. That's not really the case. This is a better than nothing option for preventing rust between two pieces of steel. The way this is actually designed to work is it's in between the two pieces of steel, and over time it'll actually like sort of corrode and it'll expand and it'll just sort of seal it. That's how it's supposed to work. But when you go actually, if I just, you know, was painting this and I just use it like a normal can of primer, although it's, you know, it's better than probably not using primer, it's probably like the worst sort of primer you could use. I've seen a few guys that are doing, you know, chassis bracing and mods like that, and just because they've got that simply in their hand, they're like, oh, yep, and they just go and paint the whole chassis or their whole diff or whatever in this stuff, and then go get a can of black rattle can and paint the rest. But that is definitely not what we'll be doing here. So the two main things are, although it's a welded through primer, you don't really want to weld through it. And although it's a primer, you don't really want to use it as primer. All you want to do with this stuff is have it between the two pieces of steel to the area that you will never get to later to paint. And it's a better than nothing solution.
Once the primer is dry, I can start tacking in the outer bracing. You will notice that when I'm tacking this in, I have my G-clamps focusing on the area that I'm welding. This is to ensure the plate is tacked hard against the rail and take up any imperfections. It's now time to fit the coil tower and tack it in place. I also went ahead and tacked up the front lower link mounts, and now you can see I'm using a wire buffing wheel to take away as much of the weld through primer as I can, just to ensure that I get a nice weld. Another thing that I do is mark out all the areas where I need to weld. This makes it a lot easier for me while I'm welding to make sure I'm welding the stitches in the correct positions. If you're watching this at home, you're probably thinking this looks like a quick and easy job. The reality is I've compressed 3 weeks worth of work into one 40-minute video here. Welding a chassis alone like this took me half a day. There's a lot of stopping and starting to let things cool down and avoid warping the chassis. Then once everything is welded in, I can start prepping it for paint. What I'm using here to rough up the chassis is Scotch-Brite. Now this is essential to make sure that the already painted surfaces are rough enough for the new paint to stick to. Then I'll give everything a thorough wax and grease remove, and from here on I'll try not to touch it with my bare hands. The reason that you don't want to touch it with your hands is because your hands have oil on them, and that is not what you want on what you're about to paint. The next step is to mask up ready for paint. Now the cab is already masked, but it's important to go back over it and make sure there is no areas that are subject to overspray. The primer that I'm using here is called PR250. It's made by Wattle and it's a 2-pack epoxy. This is one of the best industrial primers that you can buy, and it's what I use on pretty much everything. Having to paint this inside the shed means that I need to spend a bit of time setting the gun up. This isn't something that you could get away with on a gloss finish, but being a chassis, I can afford to turn things down and take my time to avoid overspray. I like to start off by getting all of the hardest areas first. This way, by the time you come back to them, they've already tacked off and you can avoid runs while trying to paint the other flat sections. Once I'm finished, it's important to give my gun a thorough clean. Usually I wouldn't use my good gun for primer or Raptor coat, but having the PPS system on this gun means that I can hold it upside down and not worry about the paint running out of the breather like standard gravity guns. I'm now mixing up some Raptor coat. This stuff is the hardener, and I'll also be putting in a cup of thinners as well. The thinners helps to give it that factory look, as the standard Raptor has too much texture. The primer has been drying since yesterday afternoon. I gave it a light sand this morning, and now it's time to apply the top coat.
That is looking really nice. So when I was painting this chassis, it was Saturday morning and it is now Monday afternoon. It's been sitting in here drying, I haven't touched it, and it's now time to peel all the plastic off and start putting it together. Righto, so cab's all bolted down, the side steps as well. I've bolted them all back up, so that's one less thing I have to worry about. Now, I'm gonna start stripping this diff, swapping everything over. All the backing plates, all the brake assemblies, the wiring for all the ABS and the locker, that's all gotta be transferred over, as well as the hubs and the diff center.
The Jrace kit uses a track-corrected sheet housing which accepts the factory Toyota parts. Another thing that's required for engineering is an upgraded handbrake so the car will hold when it's at a higher GBM. Custom 300M track-corrected axles are installed to make up for the extra width along with new braided brake lines and the rest of the housing's original components.
Righto, bit of a mission, but she's all together and looking good. I've got Rod's called in his van. You may remember it from testing the hoist, but yeah, Rod's gonna give me a lift with this. He's just ran back to his shed for a second. So Rod's a bit sad that he missed an opportunity to bring the skateboard down.
Skatey.
Next time though, I've got another diff down there to lift.
So the chuck her in. We're a lift for that. Could me engine thing do it or not? Got a sick idea, I've been back in 5. Woo!
So Rod had a better idea.
This is better.
He just bought this engine crane. When'd you buy it? Last week.
Yeah.
We did lift it on before, but it didn't have all this stuff on it, so we both looked at it and thought, nah, we'll just use this.
And I wanted to use the skateboard.
And he wanted to ride a skateboard. Oh, look at that! Woo! You nearly think we've done this before.
Guarantee.
I could just film you doing it. I don't even have to do anything.
This bloody would have been heavy.
Oh, I reckon we could have listened. Have you seen the size of the Zing boxes that I have? Oh, you bent it! That's it, done.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, mate. He's got places to be.
Gotta run. Daughter's gotta play netball. I reckon I was meant to be a mechanic.
With Rod off to netball, it was now time to start setting up the links and bolting the rear coil conversion. The lengths are set to a specific measurement and the jam nuts are done up super tight in the vise. While I'm doing this, I set the sway bar links as well and then I can start bolting it all up.
Alright, so it's all bolted in there. I've only just nipped up the bolts with the rattle gun, but once it's up in the air and I can get a good swing on it, I will go around and tighten them all properly. It's warming up a bit here in the shed today. Got the bloody aircon on to try and keep me cool, and it's only 10 AM. Next job, I'm gonna get these airbags into these coils so I can put them in the car, and once the coils are in, then I can start bolting the shocks up. The sway bar can go in, all that stuff will get bolted up, so that's the plan for now. All right, so I've got the airbags in there and coils are sitting in the car, so she's all sitting together now. Just went for a drive, local tyre shop fitted up some tyres onto these rims for me, so I'm gonna get them all unloaded. Not gonna put them on just yet. I wanna get the front end done and then I'll put them all on at the finish. But now, this is the torsion sway bar, so I'm just started to assemble it. Pretty simple to see how it works while it's sitting here on the bench like this, but yeah, these arms go on. When the car goes around a corner and leans over, it can twist that torsion bar, just like a torsion bar in a old four-wheel drive front end suspension. Similar kind of thing, just really fancy version of it. I've got the same kind of setup here in Baz. You'll be able to see it there. Same kind of setup. The reason why we use these torsion sway bars over a normal sway bar is a normal sway bar does essentially the same thing, but it has a bit of a limit to how far it can move. And I've talked about this before in a different video, but torsion sway bar still under a lot of pressure when you're flexing up on a big rock or whatever. It'll still allow that rear end to articulate the travel of the shock, basically, but it still has the same effect as a normal sway bar would when you're actually driving on the road. And as far as handling goes, you can get these torsion bars in different grades. There's like a light, medium, and a heavy. This is a heavy. I think it might even be an extra heavy, and the bolt holes on these arms are adjustable. So if you are to slide your link up so the arm's essentially shorter, it gets stiffer, and if you slide it this way, it gets not as stiff. So you can actually tune these in. Really good for a car like Baz. I would love to put one in the front of it and actually try and get it to drive really nice by tuning them in, playing with different size torsion bars and the adjustments and whatnot. Obviously, with a traditional style sway bar, you can't do anything. It's just a piece of steel and it twists. So yeah, that's why we use that. So I'm gonna go and throw that in and continue on. We are up in the air now. I've just put the rear shocks in, just bolted them up. I haven't mounted the resis yet, waiting for a couple of rubbers for those. So on these new single cab 79s, I think it's any of the DPF models, only the single cab though, they have an extra cross member here, which as you can see, this tail shaft doesn't have a lot of clearance. So this is the factory suspension in it right now, and I can't even get a finger between there. So when we go and add longer shocks, more travel, that'll hit on there. So I've got a notch kit here for this. So basically I'm going to cut a piece out with the angle grinder and weld a new piece in there, which gives it more clearance. So this here is a cross member notch kit. So basically I'm going to cut a piece out of that cross member and weld that in, and it's in a couple of pieces. It's got another piece to support it, and then I need to paint it, and then there's a bash plate goes over the whole lot and actually protects the transfer and everything else. All right, so I've just got the first piece sitting up there and clamped it to mark it out. This is basically the bottom section of the notch here. I've got to cut that piece out, and then there's a U piece. This piece here will then go in there, and then I'll weld all that out and paint it. So this grinder was struggling to cut through that. It's pretty thick, and it done it to me the other day, and I was thinking, oh, this new grinder sucks. I actually ended up going and grabbing my old one. I went over to the bench, and as I sat it down, I realised there's a dial on the back of it. It's bloody adjustable. I've just worked out you can actually turn it up and slow it down. So like if you wanted to do a very slow, precise cut, you could put it on 1, or if you want to just be like me, you just have it on 6. And now it actually turns out this is actually better than all my other old grinders under the bench, because I can't adjust them ones. So if I had just known that I could do that, I would have been right. Take 2. That's better. That even makes 20 horsepower. Hello, so we're all tacked in. This bottom piece should weld in pretty nice. I'll get it all welded out, give it a quick clean up, and we'll throw some paint on it. Whoa, righto. So I gave it a good wipe down with wax and grease remover, and I primed it with some good quality etch primer in a can, and I've given it a bit of time to dry, so now I'm going to spray some black. In an ideal world, I would have done it with the rear end and sprayed it with the gun, but because the car was on the ground, I didn't want to have to do that whole job laying down. I've got some satin black 2-pack mixed up in a can. So this isn't just a normal rattle can, this is actually 2-pack paint in a can. So what you do is you take that red thing off the top, you put it in the bottom, it releases the hardener into the paint, and then you shake it up, give it a good mix up, and you're good to go. Righto, so I have been hard at it, been working away here. I had to put the cameras down, turn the aircon on and the music up, and I've got into it, and I've got this rear end all back together. So here's a bit of a look. Fuel tanks in, airbags, coils, all the sway bars, everything's all in, everything's done. So this is where these new stainless brake lines join in. I've routed all this stuff. They're all clamped with the factory clamps and stuff so they can't move. Tail shaft's back in. I still need to adjust the handbrake and fill the diff with oil. Then once the tray goes on, I've got the airbags to hook up as well. But this handbrake and these brake lines and the wires and everything here is set so that at full droop, nothing's gonna get ripped out or overextended, pulled, stretched, whatever. This cable here is just made it, but I will be checking all this stuff out when it's at its actual ride height, where it's gonna be riding, because I don't want these to be rubbing on anything. Now these resis actually, I'm waiting for some rubbers for them. They're actually gonna go up the front here, and I need to rotate the fittings. One last thing I need to do before I forget is I need to grease all these joints, and I'll be able to grease them with my new Kincrome grease gun. Coming from a truck mechanic background, I'm so used to dragging around a big air grease pump with a whole 20-litre drum on it, and like if I just want to quickly jump under my ute out the front of the shed, grease the tail shaft, I can just grab this, slip under and do it. That's probably the best thing I like about it. So I don't want to over grease them because I don't want grease everywhere, but I want to make sure there's plenty in there. So usually when I'm greasing, even like unis in a tail shaft or anything, that when you start to hear it like do that little bit of a crackle where it's just going to try and come out, that's it, that's all you need. Any more than that, it's just going to fling around and go everywhere. Oh, Timmy will be pleased to know that I've even color coded the grease to his car. Now that the rear end's pretty well done, just a couple of little things to finish off and the tray to put back on. I've still got a lot of work to do on this front end. The good thing is I've already done that chassis notch, so it's come up really good. It's all painted, it blends in. I mean, there's a bit of dirt around the outside that, you know, there will be a big bash plate go on here, but I'm not doing that because I need to pull all this apart. So I've had a bit of a clean up, cleaned off all the benches, swept the floor, so now I can start on this front end. So I got Rod's crane there. I was gonna pull all the bolts, roll it out, and then crane it up onto the table. What I'm actually thinking is I'm gonna pull it all apart here, and then I'm gonna pull the table under here, and I'm actually gonna drop it onto the table. I don't know if it's gonna work, but I think it will. But it's just gonna save me double handling it, having to put it on the ground, pick it up. I would literally just, roll the table under, drop the hoist down a bit, undo the bolts, and then roll it out already on the table. So hopefully that works. So I've just quickly stripped the front housing. Everything's laying out on the left and on the right. So I'll go through, I'll have to wash all that stuff up before I put it back together, but I've just let the hoist down onto these jack stands just for a couple of seconds. I need to move my hoist arms off the radius arms, and I need to move them back a little bit, which I've had them under there so it's a bit more stable because I didn't have a lot of weight on the rear end, especially once I had the fuel tank and everything out. I wanted to get them further forward a little bit more, but I should be safe to move them back just a little out of the road now. Then I just got to undo the radius arms and she can come out. Finished stripping the housing, got the center out, all the brake lines and everything like that. So now I need to get this old one down here onto the pallet and this new one up here onto the bench without scratching it. Oh, you reckon you could scoot back down here on a skateboard, do a big barrel roll under the car on the hoist?
Oh, you know that's the only reason I'm coming down for.
Need your big strong arms
to help me lift this onto that pallet and lift that onto this table. Do you reckon you can?
You're telling me I shouldn't have gone surfing for 3 hours last night?
Nah, it's all right. These ones aren't heavy.
I could have really lifted that on my own.
That's a bit different. This is the same thing.
Almost got it over our heads.
There's more weight in that compared to the other one.
Yeah, it's a lot more heavy duty.
You can knock off now.
Call me when you need another concrete surfer.
So I just had to quickly run down the street. Got a haircut. Thanks, Jesso. I've got this housing pretty much ready to throw in. So diff center, brake lines, and new radius arms. I put a bit of cloth tape underneath the whole arms just to try and keep some paint on them.
So, same process to put the new housing in. I rolled it under on the table and screw around on my little chair until I get the bolts in. Then I can install the new front coils and these nice shiny new King shocks. Now I can lift the car back up and remove the table and start assembling the rest of the housing. You may have noticed I haven't tightened the radius arm bolts yet, because unlike the rear end, these ones should be done up when the car is sitting at ride height, so I'll do these later. Not going to talk too much about the swivel hub assembly in this video, because I have another one coming out soon on Big Frank, where I cover all of this stuff. All of the wheel bearings are packed with fresh grease and reinstalled and tensioned accordingly. Another thing I haven't mentioned is, while doing this, I have converted the front hubs to manual locking hubs. Now, this was a kit that I used. It replaces the whole spindle, the hub, and it comes with new nuts and a new circlip for the CV. The auto locking hubs are prone to failure, so mainly we do this for reliability. The next thing I'm going to install here is the Marks 4-wheel drive speedo corrector. This is required for engineering also, because you need to correct the speedo for the new tyre size.
Righto. So it's all back together. Fully back together. I've got stuck in, got that diff all back together, and I've got the new wheels bolted on there. Stayed back here late last night, had to sort of get it done. So yeah, tray's on, it's all done. So I've just finished bleeding up all the brakes and the fuel and everything. I got it running before I put the tray on, so I had to bleed the whole fuel system, because I had all the fuel lines actually out of the car, and these diesels, they don't have a fuel pump in the actual tank itself. The main pump at the front pulls it from the tank. So yeah, when you've got no fuel in the lines, they're a bit of a pain to prime, and especially on a car like this, which has got a secondary fuel filter, because you've got to pull it through that and through the other filter before it gets into the motor. So took a couple of videos just trying to do that. I'll give you just a quick look at that. Just trying to pressurize the fuel tank here so I can fill all those lines, because I can't prime it. I'm gonna be there all day trying to prime it, but I can't see when the fuel is coming through into this bottle. I won't know if it's worked or not. But my little action cam can link to my phone, so I can stand at the back and I can just keep doing it until I see fuel here, and then I'll know that it's worked. Whoa, how good's that? And so yeah, got it running, and then got one of the other boys to come help me bleed the brakes. I've got all that sorted, so she's all pretty well back together. I'm going to put it back up in the air, and I'll give you a quick run through of underneath of it and show you it all finished off. And then I guess I better take it outside and give it a flex test. Now, I have already actually done one of these run-throughs on my ute in one of my episodes, so I'm not going to go too in-depth. If you do want to find that one, in my ute rebuild episode, in the one where I put it all back together, the second part 2 of it, there's a full rundown on the actual Jrace stuff, and I talk about it a little bit, but I'm not going to talk about it on this. I'm just going to show you what I've done when I turn the camera off. Swivel hubs and everything all back together. Everything's all brand new bearings, new everything. Adjustable panhard. Got a alley tie rod in there.
This is a Heim joint one, and these are unbreakable pins, which go through into the factory spots. So this is all engineered and legal as well. Got a King damper in there, color-coded coils, custom resi mounts, King shocks in the front as well. So this is PSR cross-member notch kit. This is the bash plate that it comes with. I put this on off camera. I used the Kincrome gearbox jack to lift it up there because it's pretty heavy. On the back here, got a matching tie rod. Normal ends on this one. It doesn't require a Heim joint. It's just going left to right. Got a billet sway bar spacer in here. That's to allow for these shiny radius arms. They push the diff forward back into the standard position where it should be. So you require a spacer to correct that. Billet sway bar spacers, put them in there as well. And of course, fresh set of wheels on it. So the car is going to be engineered for this specific size rim. It has to be load rated. It's got to be this size tyre, which is a 315 70R17. And the lift that it's engineered with is, I believe, 4-inch. Then obviously you got the rear all back together, all the brakes, everything's all, handbrakes all in, adjusted up and working, clamped up, routed, trays on there, rewired. Jrace has designed it, and there's actually spots cut into this for the resis to be mounted in the middle there, because this customer has a rear drawer. I've mounted them up here onto this bit of tube here. I've got a couple of other little jobs to do under here. I've got an exhaust and a few bits to sort out. Might even see if Rod or someone's around to give me a hand, and we'll pick it up with the forklift and see how she goes.
What do you reckon?
Fucking sick as. On a surf trip.
Yeah. A couple surfboards on the roof, you reckon?
Couple of surfboards, like cutting the piss, we're on.
So that's her. Pretty flash.
It is a bloody doozy.
This right here is the suspension in its fully legal configuration. Both sway bars, front and rear, are installed. If I was to disconnect the front one, it'd probably move even further, but how bloody good is that for a car that still drives nice and is legal on the road? If you enjoyed this video, make sure you let me know in the comments, give it a like, and if you haven't already subscribed, you'd be bloody silly not to. Pwah! See you on the next one.